Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Yeah, I know a lot of my Democratic friends couldn't believe what they were seeing in the White House yesterday between President Zelensky and President Trump. But I think a lot of Republicans were cheering President Trump on, and I think this gives you an understanding of what's exactly cooking on that side of the aisle. Republicans on the Russia-Ukraine war, look at this, want a quick end of the war, but Russia still keeps the captured land from Ukraine. Look at this. Look at the majority of Republicans. 74%, three-quarters of Republicans, near unanimity on that particular subject, compared to just 25% who say that they support Ukraine's fight, even if it means a longer-lasting war. The bottom line is this, is it's very clear, very, very clear that Republicans want an end to this war. They are willing for Ukraine to give up that land that Russia currently has. They do not want this war extended. And I think what we saw yesterday in the White House was a clear illustration of that Republican point of view. Donald Trump representing Republicans well on this issue.
And so what is the trend line, though, on how Republicans have felt about the war ending?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I just go, oh, my goodness gracious. You see a trend line just sort of jump out at you off the screen, right? So Republicans who want the Russia-Ukraine war to end, even if Russia keeps the captured land, you go back to August of 2022, which is 46% of Republicans. You look by October of 2023, it was 55% of Republicans. But again, look at where we were by the end of last year. 74% of Republicans. My goodness gracious, this is the type of trend line that leads to what we saw in the White House yesterday, whereby Republicans have changed their point of view on this war tremendously from where they were 2 years ago, let alone 3 years ago, back in August of 2022. The bottom line is that Republicans want this war to end, even if it means that Russia keeps the captured land from Ukraine, Jessica.
It is an incredible trend line that you map out there. What about Republican feelings toward Vladimir Zelensky?
Yeah, I mean, again, what we saw yesterday in the White House is just a clear illustration of where Republicans are on this issue. Republicans on Zelensky doing the right thing when it comes to world affairs. 67% back in 2022 believe that he will do the right thing, compared to just 32% said he wouldn't. Look at where we were by last year, though. 55%, the clear majority, say that he won't do the right thing. He won't do the right thing. So yesterday in the White House, I think a lot of Republicans felt there was an illustration of that, compared to just 34%. Look at that, a 33-point drop from where we were in 2022 who said he will. The bottom line is I think yesterday confirmed the priors for Republicans who believe Zelensky will not do the right thing when it comes to world affairs.
And what about how Republicans feel about the U.S. role in helping Ukraine?
Yeah, again, I mean, look at this trend line. Look at this. GOP, who say the U.S. backs Ukraine too much when it comes to the war. Back in February of 2022, it was 6%. Look at where we were by last month. 62% of Republicans say the U.S. backs Ukraine too much. Again, I think they'd be big fans of what they saw in the White House yesterday, Jessica.
Yeah, and lastly, Zelensky tried to make the point yesterday that what happens in this war will eventually matter to the U.S. But do Americans feel that way?
Yeah, do Americans feel that way? Do Republicans feel that way? GOP on the Russia-Ukraine war outcome matters a great deal to life in the U.S. Back in March of 2022, was half of Republicans, 50%. Look at where we were by last month, just 15%. Again, Republicans will agree with Donald Trump. They disagree with Zelensky on this particular issue. It's just the story of a changed Republican Party, Jessica. It
certainly is, Harry Enten, and you lay it out with all those numbers. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Donald Trump, a master class in exercising presidential power. Welcome back to War Monday, folks. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Well, that was Harry Enten from CNN. Do the CNN guys' poll numbers lie? those are hard to beat because they're like the fast tracking poll type of things. President Trump's meeting with Ukraine President Zelensky in the Oval Office last week was indeed an example of a master and an amateur. The Ukraine president was not only outclassed, he showed up in his sweatsuit again, for God's sake, but completely inadequate for the level of policy discussion he got himself into in front of the press. Zelensky embarrassed himself, his staff, and his country, potentially upending all American support for his war effort, at least in the near term, simply because he refuses to sign the mineral rights deal he has already agreed to 3 separate times in private. He was supposed to sign them after that meeting, but chose to try and relitigate the deal in front of the American media instead, derailing the entire effort. The questions arose quickly about the predicate of this meeting, and if one party ambushed the other, well, having supported and spoken about both President Trump and Vice President Vance closely on this issue of ending the war in Ukraine, it certainly doesn't appear they did anything beyond what a reasonable person would expect them to do based on their positions and what they've said and done before. Zelensky, on the other hand, had many pre-meetings, including with powerful U.S. senators from both sides of the aisle who strongly oppose ending the war in Ukraine on the terms President Trump is working hard to make happen. The only terms proposed and taken seriously by any party in 3 years. These pre-meeting discussions did include preparation for the Oval Office meeting, according to reporting and what Zelensky has said himself. So we have to conclude that the Z-Man was getting advice from them and likely other Americans who strongly oppose the peace strategy America is now pursuing. I'm looking at you, Susan Rice, Victoria Nuland, and John Bolton, and Vindman. Unfortunately, President Trump kicked the Ukrainians out of the White House and said they were not ready to properly discuss peace and to come back when they were. The Europeans, especially the UK and France, are attempting to insert themselves into the process, but fortunately, it looks like they are also demanding Zelensky get on board with the president's proposal first. Discussing and analyzing all this with us today is our regular contributor, but it's been a while, retired U.S. Navy commander, author, college professor. One of his classes he teaches is on presidential power, by the way, and former senior DHS official Randy Arrington. Dr. Arrington, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Colonel, thanks for having me. I always thought that you were a big fan of Victoria Nuland, but I guess based on your rhetoric, you're not. I'm not either. I think she's a big cause of all the troubles that plague the Ukrainian people dating back to 2008. So, what's interesting, what you just said, listen to me, people. President Trump wants to bring peace and prosperity to the world. He truly does. But like you said, I reiterate, just before that Oval Office meeting, Zelensky met with several members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and they actually want to keep this war going. Why? You might ask why. Well, I think it's because they are most likely getting laundered kickback money from the military, industrial, political complex is what I call it. So they erroneously advised Zelensky that he held cards in this big geopolitical game, making Zelensky believe he could control the outcome of the meeting with Trump. But Trump quickly set Zelensky straight, telling him, you have no cards, and without American support, your country will be destroyed very quickly. And to reiterate, the EU will not support Ukraine with boots on the ground, like Starmer said, unless the United States leads that effort. But here's the deal, Colonel, we don't have the money, and we don't need to support Ukraine. The fate of Ukraine has zero national security implications for we the people of the United States of America. So we don't have to worry about that. We have domestic problems of our own that must be solved, like controlling our border on the south and rooting out these and destroying these drug cartels that are wreaking havoc on our people. And in that regard, Trump is getting ready to unleash hell in that situation with Mexico. He's going to announce that, I think, tomorrow in a press conference.
Yeah, Doc. Hey, if you have something showing me supporting Victoria Nuland, please send me the link to it, and I'll make a clarification, because I think she has been terrible for the United States. The teams that she has led has been terrible for the United States. Her partner in crime, John Bolton, who's on the Republican side, has been terrible for the United States. Everything that they've ever done, including this Ukraine war, really is something that Victoria Nuland and John Bolton are architects of. Do you think, based on the numbers you just saw from Harry Enton and CNN, that makes any impact on these nut jobs that want to continue this war like Victoria Nuland?
No, and, talking about Bolton and Nuland, I've told you before, I don't even know what mediocrity is or where you would go to find it. But you might find it in John Bolton and Victoria Nuland.
Yeah. We mentioned, and we're going to talk about it again throughout the show, the politicians that are supporting the funding for Ukraine, namely in our Congress. You can go all over the internet and find the clips of people like Michael McCall, I think, and they're saying things like Republicans fully support and are going to continue to give these funding to the Ukrainians. Biden hasn't done enough. Those words actually have come out of their mouths. In one case, threatening the use of nuclear weapons on Russia. And those kind of things. Do you think the Republicans in the Congress are paying attention to those numbers? Those numbers, Harry Enton just spent 3 minutes, and I did that on purpose so that this would be documented, 3 minutes on Republican numbers. Only 15% of Republicans think it's important where Ukraine and Russia's southern and eastern borders are, because it's not a vital interest to the United States. I'll say it again.
Well, here's the deal with the Republicans and all members of the House. When you talk about presidential power, I taught a class on presidential power, and Richard Neustadt, who you studied under at Harvard, he said that presidents must personally engage in behavior that will persuade people to join in his political efforts and not rely on behavior that of his staff, people in the world, politics in the world, or fellow politicians. He must persuade them that what he wants of them is what they should want for their own political well-being. So he has to engage in persuasion. And I'll reiterate, the Ukraine gravy train is over thanks to President Trump. And even more so, nations around the world are no longer going to take advantage of us. And I think when Putin signaled he was ready to do a deal, minerals and precious metals deal with the United States inside of Russia, that even more so advances that thesis that the gravy train is over. And all these things that are coming out from Elon Musk's Doge events should scare the hell out of American people. It doesn't seem to scare the Democrats, because I think a lot of those Democrats are on the take. They're getting money back. And this thing, war in Ukraine, is nothing but the biggest money laundering scam in human history. Money goes there, and it comes back to our military-industrial complex, who then dole it out to our politicians to keep their war chests full so they can get reelected. That's the goal of every elected politician. It's not good public policy. It's what do I got to do to get reelected, Colonel?
Yeah, and in the USAID scandal that Doge uncovered, you can see that there are Republican and a Democrat aligned organizations under the National Endowment for Democracy. Both of them get over $130 million a year to do things like pay for travel for Tom Cotton or whoever their Democrat guy is, I think Warner, to go on visits to places like Ukraine or the Munich conference and those kinds of things. So the money is coming back to those types of organizations, and we have to pull the thread on that, and we have to identify if it's actually going into their political campaign coffers and keeping them in office, because I suspect that's why the Uniparty, the establishment Uniparty, has over a 90% reelection rate in this country, is somehow they are pushing those dollars, which are our tax dollars, into their campaign coffers against our will. If I want to support a political candidate, I give them money. or I start an organization to raise money to give them money, like my PAC, Gator PAC, I don't expect my tax dollars against my will to go for anybody. I don't care if they're a Republican or a Democrat. Well, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll take a hand from the audience, Doc, and we'll see a little bit of the meeting from the Oval Office on Friday. And man, it was precious. I'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at WVWFoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at WVWFoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at WVWFoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on
position
this
to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this.
you're doing.
I'm not
You're in
dictating.
no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You
We're
will-
going to feel very
you will
good.
feel influenced.
We're going to feel very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influenced.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the
bad
very
position,
beginning
and he
of the
happens
war.
to be right about
From the
it.
very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a good
Brown,
position.
I was about
You
to
don't
say
have
that.
the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
playing
But
cards.
right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War
What do you-
III.
what do you
You're
speak about?
gambling with
What do you
World
speak
War
about?
III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country,
I'm
that's
with
back
all
to you,
respect to your
far
country.
more than a lot of people said
very
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once this
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today.
have you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States
what
of
are you
America
speaking about?
and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can...
not speaking loudly. He's not
Yeah.
speaking loudly. Your country's
Can I-
in big
can I-
trouble.
can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No,
Can
you've
I
done a lot
answer?
of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not
I
winning.
know.
You're not winning this.
I...
You have a damn
We-
good chance of
we are
coming out
staying,
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this
We
cabinet.
gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid
thank you.
president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
you invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I
Again,
tell you.
just say thank you.
I said a lot of
accept
times
that
thank
there,
you
accept
to
that-
American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and there was a little war in the Oval Office there on Friday morning. And you know what? I'm glad the president let it go before the opening part of that little clip there was what triggered it. They had been talking very cordially for about 36 minutes or so into this meeting. And then the president of Ukraine tried to slam down J.D. Vance. Because Vice President Vance had gone to Munich and given that tough speech. And Secretary Hegseth was in the room, too. He had gone to NATO and given that tough speech. no NATO membership for Ukraine. It's time to come to the realistic positions and deal with the realities of what is happening. You're not going to win. Nobody is going to win. The only people that are being hurt are the young people, not the relatively young people for Ukrainian. Their average age is 43 years old, of a drafted conscript that's dying in the meat grinder right now. So that is what's happening here. But I'm glad the president weighed in and let Vance go ahead with that conversation. And he told this guy, he was trying to tell him, and he did later in the meeting, say that we gave you the javelins. Obama gave you blankets, and we gave you javelins, and those javelins are what killed those tanks in the first part of this war, even though the Trump administration was out of office. So my guest today is Dr. Randy Arrington, a political science professor that teaches presidential power. Randy, there's a lot of things to unpack in that little clip, but let's take a question from the audience first. I think we've got a hand up over there. Shell, go ahead.
We have Joseph, sir.
Thank you, Colonel. Yeah, just a quick question. In light of what's going on and what happened there with Zelensky on Friday, what do you think, you guys think about, maybe it's just time. Maybe this is just the last nail in the coffin for us to just realign, just do some kind of a total realignment, because it seems like we're pouring all this money into the EU, we're pouring it all into NATO and the UN. You think it's time to just realign based off of what happened?
Well, I don't know if that is what's going to happen or what we're even seeing. But I will tell you this, a lot of folks are very, very concerned that Europe has not stepped up to the plate so far. Doc, what are your thoughts on that?
Like I said earlier, the European Union will never put boots on the ground or give them much money unless it's led by the Americans. And I think that the European Union is just leading Ukraine down the primrose path. And in the end, Ukraine is going to get totally wrecked as a nation, more so than they are now, if they follow that misguided policy. Here's what I believe the best policy path forward for Ukraine is. One, end the war. Then make themselves neutral in the political competition between Russia and NATO, and then allow other nations to help build them back up economically. That would be the best alternative for the Ukrainian people. What the European Union is doing is encouraging the Ukrainians and their president to play tough with the Russians, making them believe they will ultimately defeat Russia and Putin and become part of the West and become part of NATO. Zelensky is playing along with this, and he's unwilling to compromise and wants to pursue a hardline policy in the war, a war which he can never win. He will never become part of NATO. And if for your audiences to understand this, we and NATO had a big role in starting this war and the invasion that was put forth by the Russians to cross a border into Ukraine. We told the Russians we would not move NATO and our memberships countries further east towards them, and that we have done nothing but that. And I think it was 94, Clinton signed some sort of a piece of legislation that really started them moving further and further towards the border there with Russia. Countries like Lithuania and Georgia became members of NATO. Of course, Putin invaded Georgia. And so we broke the promise that we gave the Russians about not moving NATO any closer to their border. It's like putting, if Russia were to put a military base on our Rio Grande border in Mexico or up there on the northern border with Canada, we would not allow that to happen. Think of it in those terms. What did we do when Russia or Soviet Union tried to put missiles in Cuba, which is only 90 miles off of Florida? We blockaded them and almost had World War II restart with a nuclear exchange. They are worried about their national security. A lot of people say Putin is a nut job, this, that, and the other. I don't think so. I think Putin is very rational when it comes to the national security of the Russian people. What do you think, Colonel?
Yeah, I think he's trying to reestablish the empire, the Russian Empire, not the Soviet Union, which was not the Russian Empire, but the Russian Empire from a nationalist perspective. And that's what I think he is. I think he's a Soviet-trained, retired KGB colonel. I don't think it. I know it. That's a fact. That sees his country of Russia as being deserving, and not only deserving, but more than capable of being one of the world's superpowers, and wants to reestablish its place in that very small circle of nations. But what I don't see is him building the capability or developing the political will amongst his people to roll across the rest of Western Europe. And what I see in that little guy, I call him the Z-Man now, in the Z-Man in that meeting is someone that's fallen prey to the intense propaganda of the Western intelligence agencies and NATO and the United States that you can win this. We're with you. We're going to give you billions of dollars. We need you to win this to save Western civilization and save freedom. And he's bought into a lie because Western civilization is not at stake at this point. Freedom, from our perspective, is more at stake if we continue to let countries in the EU destroy freedom of speech. I will take except of what you said about the EU not going in. I agree with that, but the UK is not part of the EU. And Sturmer's already given in a speech his 4 principles, and one of them is boots on the ground for British soldiers and to give 5,000 more air defense missiles to the Ukrainians. So once boots go on the ground of a NATO member, that NATO member gets attacked by Russia, they're going to try to invoke Article 5 and Article 6. And that should be a concern of ours. Not that I think that we should get into the fight over it, but it's going to have to be something that's worked through by President Trump and the Trump administration. I'm sure they're talking about how they would have to deal with that if that would occur. But that's why I think the UK has taken the step out in the lead, is because they're no longer part of the EU. And they see it as less risk, but it's all a high-risk gamble. And for what? For what? That's the question. Do you see any benefit for the United States and then the EU even by them taking this really radical step?
Like I said, I'll reiterate, the fate of the Ukraine nation has zero national security implications for the United States, maybe a little more for the EU and France and Great Britain. But if you look at that plan that Starmer put forward, the initial phase of the French-British alternative peace deal for Ukraine would involve sort of a month-long truce in the air, on the seas, and in their energy infrastructures. Then he said their second phase would be actually involve boots on the ground and British airplanes in the air. Again, I reiterate, this will never happen because I believe it's all diplomatic hogwash designed to gain political capital for him in the UK. And you're right, all these countries over there that should be upholding people's freedom of speech are putting people in jail, Colonel, for putting memes on the internet. How ridiculous is that? It's happening in Germany. It's happening in London. They don't have freedom of speech anymore. Of course, we kicked those people out of our country, 250 years ago. So I don't really care much about what Starmer or anybody from the UK says, or Germany. I think Germany is a natural enemy of the United States of America. And now you might not like what I say, but I think they're a natural enemy of the United States of America.
Well, we got another question in the audience. Let's go ahead and take that before we go to the break. Go ahead, Shel.
We have AC Truth, sir.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My question is, do you think it would be wise if President Trump did a large press conference and was shown on every major television and radio where he explained the details of what we were facing and the fact that Zelensky had actually already signed mineral rights in January towards Europe, and that he came to the office to not actually sit down and make deals, but to pressure and bully, and that Trump does not want us to go into World War III?
Great question, Doc.
I think that'd be a good idea. Again, I reiterate what Neustadt taught us on presidential power. The president of the United States can't accomplish much things by just issuing orders and directives. He gets things done by persuading others that what he wants to do as president is in their best interest. So he could have that worldwide press conference persuading people, and Trump is very good at this. He's a very good deal maker, persuading people that what he wants to do is right for the entire global system. And I think having Trump back in the White House is not only good for the United States of America in general and individual Americans in particular, but for the global community. It brings a sense of balance, and it brings a sense of prosperity and peace to the world. Not everybody. I mean, there's countries in Africa where he can't have much effect. But if he can convince the world leaders that what he wants is peace and prosperity, he doesn't pose a threat to China or to Russia or to Ukraine. I just want peace and prosperity. Let's come together and work that out in a diplomatic fashion. I think that'd be something that would be worthwhile for him to pursue. And you also, here's the trouble though, you're never going to convince a lot of these Democrats. I call them Marxist Democrats because today they're Marxist Democrats. Even though you call yourself a Democrat, and I've told this before, Colonel, if you support Marxist communist public policies, you are a Marxist communist, whether you believe it or not, or whether you realize it or not. So there's a lot of people out there, they hate you and me, and they hate Trump and J.D. Vance just because they're on the right side of the aisle. They've been brainwashed their entire lives to believe lies that come from the mouths of Democrats, and they've staked their whole life on those lies being true. And one day they'll have a political epiphany and realize, wait a minute, I've been lied to my whole life, and then they'll come around. It's happening more and more now, and I think we might see some of those political epiphanies occurring around the country. But there are so many people that will not believe anything that comes out of his mouth or my mouth or the Colonel's mouth when we tell the real truth.
Yeah, and we'll see some real truth after this break. Treasury Secretary Bessent lays out that Zelensky has been playing games with this mineral rights agreement that he's agreed to 3 times. And you'll hear him talk about that when we come back from the break, and we'll dive into that with Dr. Arrington. I'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday. Unfortunately, we still have more war.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
So, Laura, I went all the way to Kyiv because I thought it was important. President Trump sent me there to, again, we were supposed to bring the Ukrainian people closer to the U.S. people, send a strong signal to Russian leadership that we had not only shared values, but now shared economic interest, and also have a strong signal for the American people that their tax dollars were actually going to work. Instead, President Zelensky and I had a very tough 45-minute meeting at a very loud decibel level, and I kept telling him, Mr. President, the purpose of this is to show the Russians there is no daylight between us. And at the end of the meeting, he said, well, I'm not signing this. And I said, at the end of the meeting, I said to him, what do you want to go out and tell the press? I said, because I don't want to go out and show the Russians that there's daylight in between us. And he said, well, I'm going to go out and say I'll sign it in Munich. Then he got to Munich and he ran into Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio, very different than Vice President Harris and Secretary Blinken, but he didn't sign the agreement. So finally, we were supposed to have the signing today. It was supposed to be a great day, and this is one of the biggest own goals in diplomatic history.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking about President Trump, and he is really giving a master's class in presidential power. My guest today is retired U.S. Navy commander and doctor of philosophy, political science professor Randy Arrington, who's taught on classes on presidential power. And Dr. Arrington, 3 times he has said, I agree to this, and then refused to sign it. That third time was what you saw in the Oval Office on Friday. What is going on here with this guy?
Zelensky wants to get strong assurances from the United States, from President Trump, that for the minerals that we're going to extract, we get 50% of the income from that. They get 50%. It pays back our taxpayers for the $170 billion we've been sending to Ukraine. But Trump has been telling him, we're not going to give you any security assurances, because if he did that, Colonel, that would be like giving him membership in NATO light. And he's not going to do that, because we, like I said, we have problems of our own. Our taxpayer dollars should be used to solve those problems. And Lord knows we have many, and we have to solve those problems and keep our people on firm ground and moving forward into prosperity as a free nation. If we don't solve our own problems, we might go down the tube as well. So he's not going to give him any strong assurances of security. Again, that would be NATO light.
But if we establish that as a national interest for the United States, we are giving them, the Ukrainians, that leverage, that the U.S. finally has a national interest inside their country. I mean, you can't get much better of a security assurance than that, other than the assignment of U.S. forces into your territory somehow. Can you?
Well, again, that would give us a recompense for what we spent on military hardware and sending them cash, boodle of cash. And again, you're right, that if we improve the economy of Ukraine and rebuild them after this devastating war comes to a close, then that would help them be prosperous and their people to move forward. Again, I think it makes much more sense to end the fighting now. We know all about war. We don't agree with war. We're ready to go to war, but as always, the last option for us as warriors. It makes much more sense, in my humble opinion, to end the fighting now, make Ukraine neutral as far as NATO and Russia is concerned, and then support them in their economic recovery, which is what this mineral rights deal would do. They get half the profits, we get half the profits. It helps them become a stronger nation economically, and that gives them the prosperity they need to move forward and be strong for their people. Otherwise, they'll be in shambles, Colonel. And they are pretty much in shambles now, but it'll be worse if the fighting continues. They're never, ever going to beat Russia. Listen to me, people. Ukraine will never, ever win a war against Russia. Just know that.
Yeah, and the large deposits of these rare earth minerals are in the Donbass that Russia occupies. Right. And that leads me to another question I wanted to ask you, Randy, and that is that the Russian president came back with almost, I wouldn't call it a counteroffer, but an offer of his own to the United States to establish an economic deal on their rare earth minerals, which are not just in the Donbass, which they've annexed, by the way, due to a vote, but also in the rest of the country. Why do you think Putin did that outside of the negotiations of the peace deal?
I think Putin respects Donald Trump. I learned growing up as a young officer in the Navy that it seemed to me like the international community disrespected a Democrat in the White House, and they totally respected a Republican in the White House. For me, as a young man, starting with Ronald Reagan being in the White House and the Iranian hostage crisis, which I was a part of, the day he got inaugurated, not 1 hour later, they put those 57 hostages on a plane back to the United States. To me, that told me that people around the world respect and understand what a Republican says is what he means. He's going to do what he says. Whereas the Democrats are wishy-washy and mostly in the game of politics for themselves, not to be public servants and serve the people. And I think not all Republicans are that way, but I think a majority of Republicans and conservatives are there to do their public service, which I want to continue myself, and do that for we the people. One thing that the people need to understand is we were warned by ex-presidents about what's happening right now. George Washington told us, beware of foreign entanglements. And Dwight Eisenhower, in his farewell address, told us to beware of the military-industrial complex because they are corrupt. Today, I call that the military-industrial political complex, because it includes not only the military arms companies like Lockheed and Raytheon, it includes politicians who are basically corrupt. It includes the bureaucracy, which is highly corrupt. And it includes the clandestine deep state, which is highly corrupt. People don't understand what's going on. We live our lives, and that's fine that we have this umbrella of liberty to live our lives, take care of our family, our community, that sort of stuff. But we need to start paying more attention to what's happening on the grand stage in politics in Washington, D.C., because it does affect us. They always say that all politics is local. Well, that's true to a certain extent. But when you start having those types of public policies coming out of Washington, D.C., it becomes local for us. It hurts our nation. It hurts our state. It hurts our community. It hurts us individually as family members. So we got to be very careful of what we're doing, and we got to watch what's happening inside Washington, D.C. And the people in politics count on us being distracted by other issues, and they do that on purpose so they can do the smoke and mirrors two-step and take care of something over here that benefits them while we're distracted over here with something else. Don't be distracted by these things, people. Pay attention to what's going on. Get involved.
Oh, yeah. Your point about impacting us at the local level. Look, this is why they hate Doge on both sides of the aisle. Elon Musk and Doge just published over the weekend that 93,000, a little bit more than 93,000 Social Security recipients are receiving those checks inside Ukraine itself. How many American citizens are getting Social Security retirement inside Ukraine? Do you really think it's 93,000? And if so, how are they doing that?
Well, you're good for corruption, and your good friend Senator Bill Cassidy, who I'm running against to replace, he came out just today and said that Social Security will be insolvent by 2037. Social Security is supposed to be a lockbox, a completely closed lockbox that they can't touch, but that idiot Lyndon Baines Johnson opened it up and put it in the general fund. That's why it's a problem. Again, a Democrat president is supposed to be locked. And we're not going to run out of money for people that rely on Social Security. How about we stop giving away money? And Elon Musk is finding this out. Trillions of dollars are being given away illegally. And our politicians, several politicians, know this, but they keep their mouths shut because they are the recipients of kickbacks. Again, a politician that gets elected, his main goal is not good public policy to help we the people. It's what do I got to do to get reelected? And most of them, what do they got to do? They got to raise $50 million. They got to raise $50 million. How do they do that? Not everybody's going to give them $10 or $20 out there in the general population. They've got to get it in the form of kickbacks under the table. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And I think Doge, Elon Musk should Doge every single member in Congress. 535 people in Congress, Doge every one of them.
Yeah, I think every state should have a Doge office in it, too, by the way. In addition to the state auditors and those kind of folks, the federal Doge organization ought to come to every state and do a very thorough audit and investigation because we're finding out a lot of things, Doc. Well, I have to go back to the meeting just a minute. I want to get your take on Zelensky's dress. Look, Ronald Reagan wouldn't even walk into the Oval Office unless he was wearing a suit and a tie. That's a known fact. I've never seen Donald Trump not in a suit and tie in the Oval Office. As a matter of fact, I've never seen anybody in casual clothes meeting with any president inside the Oval Office. But this guy shows up in his sweatsuit again.
Well, I wear a nice golf shirt when I'm your guest, and when I'm your stand-in host, I wear a shirt and tie. So that's when I do it. But as a guest, I just wear my golf shirt, and I'll wear a coat and tie next time I'm your guest, your host.
That question is not about you. I mean, President Trump, when he met him at the car, said, "Well, he dressed for the occasion." He was being sarcastic. What do you think? Do you think that hurt Zelensky in the meeting with the president?
Oh, well, I kind of look at that like Fetterman. Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania does the same thing, and I'm not sure about Fetterman whether he even owns a suit or he has to wear that because he got some physical, or abnormality that has to make him do that. But I think yes, it is disrespectful for him to wear that little jumpsuit inside the White House. He's got a nice wife. His wife can help him pick out a nice suit from somewhere and wear that suit and tie and show some respect. Is it disrespect to go like that? It's not respectful. I don't know if it's a disrespect, but it's not respectful. You need to dress for the occasion. And I don't know if you know this. Did you hear what Zelensky said about J.D. Vance? First of all, he wouldn't even call him Mr. Vice President. He called him J.D., and then he called him a bitch. Did you hear that? In his native language. Yeah. Called him a bitch.
Reporting, but I to confirm that. Well, when we come back, I want to dive into this political piece a little bit, since you are running for the U.S. Senate against Bill Cassidy over in Louisiana, and we'll see a clip from the powerful U.S. senators, especially the Republicans, about this meeting that Zelensky had with them before the Oval Office meeting. And it set the tone, is what the sweatsuit did, a tone of disrespect. I'm sure if it was me as president of the United States, that's the way I would think about it. And I'm sure Donald Trump's sarcastic comment about he dressed for the occasion indicates that. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
Morning.
Thank you so much.
So big team.
Yeah.
Hello. Very good to see you. How are you? Hi. Hello.
You got a new?
Yeah. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Happy to see you. We know each other. It's not the first meeting, and I'm very proud that Ukraine has such big strategic, even not only partner, friend like the United States. So we are very thankful for this.
We're here today as a show of support. We have committee chairs.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday. Unfortunately, the Ukraine-Russian war continues. It's in part mainly because of the intransigence of the president of Ukraine. I wouldn't say those talks have stalled, but the Ukrainian president is definitely being a fly in the ointment of President Trump's attempt to get this killing ended as quickly as possible. And it doesn't make any sense. What also doesn't make any sense to me is that the powerful Republicans that continue to support this and don't appear to be making any social media posts supporting President Trump after that meeting in the Oval Office. And what you just saw there was the Senate Armed Services Committee led by one of my senators in Mississippi, who's the chair, is Senator Roger Wicker. And that committee, both sides of the aisle, is strongly in the section of the cheering crowd that's right behind the Ukrainian team, so to speak. And they're all for getting as many Ukrainians killed as possible and trying to kill as many Russians as possible. And that's what their intent is. And they don't appear to be backing off, and they don't appear to be openly supporting the president of the United States. And my guest today is Dr. Randy Arrington. As he said before the break, he is a political candidate right now. He's running for the United States Senate against my old buddy, Senator Bill Cassidy, who is another one of those squishes Republicans. But he's a warmonger, too. He fully supports the Ukrainian war effort, wants to keep that money flowing, and doesn't really have much of a concern for the potential loss of American and European lives in a wider war if it were ever to get to one. Dr. Arrington, one of the things that really puzzles me is going back to the opening video I showed of those extremely powerful polling numbers. They were all Republican numbers, and they were all overwhelmingly supporting President Trump and his peace effort and opposing this continued funding and giving material and risking of World War III. What is going on in the minds of these senior Republicans?
You and I are both old enough to remember when the Democrats were against war. And now it seems like they're for this war. And again, you follow the money. It's always the money trail. Find out where the money's going, where it's coming back to. And it's coming back to these politicians so they can get reelected. And again, these guys, the usual suspects in that meeting, advised President Zelensky that he held those cards in this big geopolitical game, making him kind of puff out his sweatsuit and adopt a harder line and not fall back and say, maybe I should reconsider this and consider what Trump is wanting to do, which is peace and prosperity. Trump quickly, if you remember that meeting, quickly advised President Zelensky, look, dude, you have no cards. You've got no cards. And without the United States, your country will be decimated. You need to make peace now. And we've been saying that for months or years, actually. You need to make peace now because you've already lost almost 1 million young men and women. Young men and women are losing their lives. And he conscripts these people. They don't do a draft. They get these vans and they go out and look on the streets for middle-aged men, middle-aged and younger, and they grab them, throw them in this van, and take them off. They're going to be members of the Ukrainian army. And so they are getting desperate. And he's not showing that, but he does understand that Trump is highly respected. You saw that in his body language. He does understand that. And I think eventually he's going to come around. And I think after that meeting, he did say he still wants to sign that minerals agreement with the United States and President Trump, because I think he understands deep down the war is not going to be won and his country needs to be rebuilt. And that mineral deal and precious metal deal will help get the income they need to rebuild Ukraine. Otherwise, he's going to be the president that was president when they destroyed that country. And that's a terrible, fate for him as president. Of course, he's just in my estimation, he's a clown. He's not really a president. He's a comedian before he got elected. Of course, we elected an actor, but Ronald Reagan was one of the strongest, best presidents we've ever had. But this guy, Zelensky's a clown, in my humble opinion.
Well, we elected him too, Victoria Nuland, and that team.
Victoria Nuland,
that's who put the. And that's what started this war years before February of 2022, when Russia decided to invade. The United States kicked it. What puzzles me, though, is, even Lindsey Graham, who, let me just caveat this, Lindsey Graham's getting challenged by a credible candidate in his primary that's coming up, I think, in 2026. But Lindsey Graham even walked away from Zelensky after the Oval Office meeting, and he was in the pre-meeting. I don't know if you saw him there. He's part of that Armed Services Committee team, and he's generally on board with give them as much money and arms as they can. We can give them no matter what it costs us. But he's walking away from Zelensky, and even said something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing here, folks, not quoting, something to the effect of, somebody gave him some bad advice about standing up to Donald Trump, and he lost, as I could have predicted for him. So who is he listening to? There's a lot of stories out there. Susan Rice, Obama's one of his team, was on the news talking about all the details of the mineral rights agreement that really aren't public. She was apparently aware of it. So a lot of folks are saying, hey, she must have talked to Zelensky and given advice. That would be one quarter. But these Republicans and Democrats on the Armed Services Committee, in the video, that's why I showed the video, I suspect that some of them are giving him advice, too, to push back on President Trump, and that President Trump will get in line. Do you think that's a smart idea?
I'll tell you what I always teach my university students. When you see a politician say something or do something, analyze that behavior or that statement based on the current political context or historical context. What has he got to lose? He's running for re-election. He's being primary. So he's going to do and say the things that he thinks and his staff thinks will get him re-elected. He may not believe it, but I think Lindsey Graham is one of the most wishy-washy politicians that has ever been in Washington, D.C., and I wish the people like he's from Kentucky would get rid of him and send him back to wherever he came from. But again, use the current political context or historical context. What's going on in the world? What's going on in his world? Why are they making that statement? They're making that statement because they want to do something for themselves, and they have to say this because of the current historical context.
Well, my question is, why aren't the rest of these senior Republicans, these are senior Republicans, publicly coming out and saying they support the President of the United States and his peace plan effort instead of remaining silent? They're remaining silent. And whether they're up for re-election or not, that can't be good for the Republican Party that's in control of all three branches of government right now.
The Republican Party has an innate way of screwing themselves when they have a majority. They have done it throughout history. If they would just be honest with the people and tell them exactly what we want to do, and this will be the results if you allow us to do that, I think they'd have no problem getting reelected and steering the nation in the right direction and not running off, into some ravine as a runaway train. And that is what they do time and time again. And somebody's going to tell them, when I get there, when we get elected, I'm going to tell them, just tell the people the truth. Don't worry about your reelection. Tell them the truth. If you tell them the truth, they will respect you for it. And I think in the end, you'll get more votes and get reelected. Don't listen to your political advisors and then lie to the people. And, I don't think Lindsey Graham has been an effective senator. I think he buddied up with John McCain, which I could tell you lots of stories about John McCain as a naval aviator. But he needs to understand the American people want to hear the real truth. And that's why they tune in to the Rob Maness live show. They want to hear the real truth, Colonel.
Well, and we have a massive Republican majority. 74% of Republicans support the president's approach to Ukraine. 74% of Republicans very rarely agree on anything. We're known for our infighting. That's why it took us so much effort to get to the point where we barely control the House of Representatives, we barely control the U.S. Senate, and we have control of the presidency. And we have some control over the Supreme Court because President Trump was able to, in spite of our infighting, appoint a lot of Supreme Court justices in his last term. And we even have to thank Mitch McConnell, who I can't stand because he's bad for freedom, bad for peace, and bad for prosperity. But we have to give him credit. He helped the president appoint those Supreme Court justices. So we control all of that. And we have 74% of Republicans supporting the president of the United States. I would think that every Republican office holder and everybody seeking office in the Republican Party would be chiming in on this all over the social media, but I can't find my senators post about it.
Look, all power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. These elected members in the House and Senate think they know much more and are much more in tune with reality than we the people are. I teach my students, those people that are elected actually hate we the people. They do. They hate you. And they think they know more than you, and they're going to do what they think is best. And oftentimes that's the wrong policy to pursue. Listen to the people. Aggregate-wise, the people are very intelligent. Maybe individually we're not, but when we come together, 74% of us are telling you what we think you should be doing. That's what you should be doing, Colonel.
Yes, that's what they should be doing. And mark my words, there will be challenges to all of these Republicans. You may not be up next year, but your seat's going to be challenged in the ensuing years because we won't forget. Well, Doc, where can people find you? You're running for office over in Louisiana. Tell people how to go help you by giving donations and those kind of things.
I'm on Twitter, Randy Arrington 8. And if you just type in Randall Arrington, PhD, I'm all over the internet. And I get tired of being called a Nazi every week, so be nice. I get called a Nazi every week. Be nice, scumbag. Somebody told me I was a scumbag. I said, you don't even know me. I'm just a regular guy. I just want to continue my public service. So please be nice.
Yeah, these days in America, if you're on one particular side of the aisle, you're a person like you that supports and defends the actual Constitution of the United States and believes in doing that, the other side is going to call you a Nazi because they're Marxists. And we know they're Marxists, as you've said during the show. Well, thanks for coming on. We'll get you on back again soon, Doc. We appreciate you. It's a great show. Tomorrow is Tuesday, and guess what? Brandon House, the CEO of Worldview Tube, will be my guest, and we'll be talking about the underhandedness of the Associated Press and Reuters and how they're keeping independent media out of the White House. I'll see you then on The Rob Maness Show.